Hello, I'm Tristen Bradney, and today I'll be conducting a code review for my Inventory Manager mobile application, originally developed for the CS360 mobile architecture and programming class. This is an Android application built in Java that provides inventory tracking with user authentication, CRUD operations, and SMS notifications for low stock alerts. The app uses SQLite for data persistence and supports multiple users with a shared inventory system. In this code review, I'll analyze the existing code across three categories: software engineering and design, algorithms, data structures, and databases. For each category, I'll describe what the code currently does, identify weaknesses using a code review checklist, and explain the planned enhancements that will demonstrate key computer science skills aligned with the CS 499 course outcomes. So for category one, the current architecture overview, the application currently uses a basic architecture without a formal pattern. If you look at the onCreate method at line 50, you can see that all initialization happens here. The initialization components In the initialization components, I'm utilizing UI elements, creating the array list, and instantiating database helper and SMS helper. This creates tight coupling, and the activity depends directly on these concrete classes. When adding a new item, look at the new item method at line 143. Um, at line 155, the activity directly calls database helper dot add inventory item, new item, and current user. The activity is handling UI logic, input validation, business logic, and database operations all in one place. There's no separation of concerns here. So going to database helper.java, we're going down to line, I believe, 339. Yeah. So the database helper add inventory item method at line 339 uses content values. I believe they're around line 358, 357, to insert data, which is good practice. However, the activity has to know about the database implementation details. So now I'm going to go to loginactivity.java. I believe we want to look at line 170. All right, so the login activity validate input method at line 170 shows better validation practices with specific error checks. And I think this is actually well done, and I'll reference this as a positive example. So now for identifying some weaknesses, we're going to go to inventoryactivity.java. I think issue number one is a lack of a formal architecture. Looking at inventory activity, there's no MVV, MVP, or any formal pattern. The activity handles UI management, business logic, data operations, and user input validation throughout the code file, and this violates the single responsibility principle. Now, looking at structure issue number 2, I believe it is at line 77. I'm sorry, I'm having trouble finding this. Okay, there we are. So line 81 of inventory activity. You can see I'm creating database helper directly, and the activity depends on the concrete class, so there's no abstraction layer here. And then issue number 3, I think, would be inconsistent documentation. I believe it's line 187. Yeah, so the add item to view method at line 187 lacks detailed documentation despite being complex. Um, if you compare this to the login activities validate input at line 170, I put clear comments in that one. I believe it's around now. Yeah, see, so I do document this a little better than that previous method. All right, so next, um, is an error handling issue. I believe it is with the add new item. An inventory activity. Okay. So at line, I believe 155, the database call database helper.add inventory item could fail, and there's no try catch block, only return value checking. And so for the next issue, um, I believe it is a code organization issue. If we look at line 187, it's a complex method. The add item to view method starting at line 187 is very long and does everything. It creates layouts, sets colors, attaches listeners, handles formatting, and this should be broken down into smaller methods. Now, for the next issue, I believe there's a defensive programming issue, and I think it is around line 200. I believe it is in. Yes, so line 206, the add item to view method has no null check for the item parameter. If null is passed, it would crash when calling add or when calling item.getName. So moving on, for the planned enhancements, based on these findings, what I plan to do is enhancement one would be implementing MVVM architecture with room database. I'll refactor to use model view model pattern with room persistence library, and this will separate UI activity from business logic, which is like the model view. Um, it'll abstract data access through repository pattern. It'll use live data for reactive updates and replace direct database calls with proper architecture layers. And I think this addresses issues 1 and 2. For enhancement number 2, I'll create a validation utility class. Currently, validation is scattered. Login activity has good validation, but inventory activities validation around I think 530 is less thorough. I plan to implement maximum length checks, format validation, null safety checks, and consistent error messages. And I think this addresses issue number 6. So for enhancement 3, I will want to improve code documentation. I think I'll add Java doc comments to all the methods and refactor large methods like add item to view into smaller focused methods, which I believe addresses issues 3 and 5. And for the course outcomes, I believe this satisfies outcome 4, which is using industry standard MVVM and room. Outcome 5, which is security mindset through validation, and outcome 2, which is professional documentation. All right, next we're going to be looking at algorithms and data structures. So for the existing functionality, we're going to look at inventory activity.java. I believe it's around line 34. Line 37. So private list at line 37, the data structure is private list inventory item inventory items initialized as array list. This simple list with no this is a simple list with no indexing or optimization. So looking at line 102, the load shared inventory from database method at line 102 loads all data at once. And if we'll look at the line 106, the database helper get all inventory items. So looking at database helper.java, I believe around line 420. So the load shared, or I apologize, the get all inventory items method at line 420 executes a SQL query with hard-coded order by, and users can't change the sorting. So going back to inventory activity, There is currently no search functionality, meaning that users will have to scroll through everything. There's no sorting options, meaning that the items will always display in modified date order, and there's no priority queue for low stock items. So issue number 1, I believe, would be missing search function, and finding specific items requires manual scanning, visual scanning through all items loaded. And then issue number 2 would be no sorting implementation. So issue number 2, um, items display in array list order from line 1, I believe it was 187 onwards. It says the database query has fixed order by users can't sort name, quantity, or price. And then issue number 3 would be no priority queue. The low inventory threshold is just a simple comparison. There's no data structure tracking which items are most urgent. Issue number 4 is basic data structure. The simple array list, the inventory items at I believe line 34 has no optimization. There's no hash map for lookup. There's for fast lookup. There's no tree set for sorting and no priority queue for alerts. And issue number 5 is no performance optimizations. So everything loads all at once from the database with no pagination or lazy loading of any kind. So for the planned enhancements, I plan to add search view with real-time filtering using linear search, which is O of n, I believe, and which is acceptable for expected dataset size under 500 items, and this addresses issue number 1. For enhancement number 2, I will add sorting. I'll implement sorting using collections.sort with custom comparators. Users can sort, allowing users to sort by name in ascending to descending order, quantity in low to high or high to low order, and price. Collections.sort uses timsort with O in log n complexity, I believe, and this addresses issue number 2. For issue number 3, I'll implement priority queue for low stock items ordered by urgency ratio. And this, I believe this provides O log n insertion times and O1 access to most urgent item. And I believe this addresses issues 3 and 4. As for the course outcomes, I believe this covers outcome 3, managing algorithmic trade-offs. And for outcome number 4, I believe this satisfies outcome number 4 with solutions that deliver value, improving the user experience. All right, now category 3, which is databases. So now we're going to look at database helper.java. The database has 2 tables that are defined around lines, I believe, 49 through 66. So, yes, right here. The users table, which starts at line 49, has a user ID, a username. The user ID is the primary key. The username is unique, not null. It has a password hash, which is not null, and a created date. The inventory table around line 56 has an item ID, which is the primary key, an item name, which is unique, not null, and item quantity is not null, default 0, item price, not null, default 0.0, created by, last modified by foreign keys, and a created date and modified date. I think that the schema shows good practices with foreign keys and not null constraints. Now we're going to look at authentication user. I believe it is at line 232. Yes. So authentication at line 232 uses parameterized queries around line 243, 244. This is secure and prevents SQL injections. So right here. Now we will look at line, I believe, 339 for add inventory item. Okay. So create at line 339 uses content values around, I believe, 358, 357, which are also secure. Now we're going to look at line 420. I believe it's line 420 for all inventory items. Method. There we go. This uses raw query with join. So it uses no input, user input, so it's safe. Now looking at, I believe, line 468. Yeah, 468 in the update inventory item method. It uses parameterized where clauses, which are also secure. Now going down to line, I believe, 493. 504, the delete inventory item method. It also uses parameterized queries, which is secure. And then looking at line 534, the hash password uses SHA 256, which is good security practice. So, for identifying weaknesses, I think issue number 1 is a potential SQL injection at the get all inventory items, I believe. Again, that was 420. Yes. So the current queries are safe, but at line 420, raw query uses string concatenation for column names, when I add search functionality, I need to use parameterized queries. So issue number 2 is there is no audit trail. So the database tracks who modified audits, but there's no audit log table. So we don't know what the old values were, the complete change history, or when exactly changes occurred. And this is critical for business inventory tracking. So for issue number 3, I believe I have weak database constraints. I believe it's around line 56. Um, I cannot find where I had this written down. I apologize. I'm going to move on to issue 4 now. I apologize. I can't find where I wrote that down at. I do have written down that there are missing check constraints for item quantity and item price, but nothing prevents negative values. So there are no check constraints, but I can't find them at the moment. I apologize. So for issue number 4, there's no transaction management. Um, so we'll look at look up inventory or update inventory item. I believe around 467. Right, 468. Um, there's no transaction wrapping. So for complex operations involving multiple steps without transactions, the database could be left uh, inconsistent if one step fails. So for issue number 5, um, we will look at line, I believe 237 in authenticate user. 232. Um, every method opens a new database connection like this one. So no connection, reuse, or prepared statement catching, which is an issue. Um, next, we will look at update inventory item. I believe 468. There we go. So issue number 6 is manual timestamps. In the update inventory item method, modified date is updated manually. this should be automatic via a database trigger. So next, for the planned enhancements, um, for enhancement 1, I plan to use secure parameterized search. For enhancement number 2, I will add an audit log table, which will provide accountability and change history addressing issue number 2. For enhancement number 3, I will check constraints and triggers and auto update triggers. This enforces integrity at a database level and addresses issues number 3 and number 6. For enhancement number 4, I plan on doing transaction wrapping, where I'll wrap complex operations in transactions to ensure automicity, which addresses issue number 4. And for the course outcomes, I believe this satisfies outcome 5, uh, which is the security mindset and preventing SQL injection and audit logging. Um, I believe it satisfies course outcome number 3 with trade-offs, um, with audit storage versus compatibility. And then I believe it satisfies outcome number 4, industry practices, which is parameterized queries and constraints. So, in this code review, I've analyzed my inventory manager application across 3 areas: software engineering, identified lack of architecture, complex methods, inconsistent documentation, and for the enhancements, I plan on implementing MVV with room, validation, and documentation. For algorithms, I've identified missing search, no sorting, excuse me, simple array list. And for enhancements, I plan on implementing a search with an O in linear algorithm, collections.sort with time sort, O of n log n, and then priority queue for alerts. For databases, I found good security practices, but also identified missing audit trails, no check constraints in the schema, and no transactions. So for the enhancements, I plan to secure search queries, audit log table, constraints and triggers, and transaction managements. So these enhancements transform a basic student project, I believe, into professional quality application, demonstrating modern development practices, algorithm selection understanding, and security conscious database design. I'll implement systematically MVVM architecture first, then sort, search algorithms, and then finally database enhancements. Each will be documented showing how it meets course outcomes. This code review shows my growth, and I can now identify issues I didn't recognize when originally writing this code. This awareness is the most valuable skill I believe I've developed. Thank you for your time.